Have you ever felt like you're slowly slipping away from the life you once understood? Not dramatically, not all at once, but quietly, subtly, as if the things that once gave you comfort no longer fit. The friendships, the ambitions, even the way you talk to yourself, it all feels off. Like you've outgrown something, but you can't yet name what it is. Maybe you've looked around and wondered, why don't I relate to the people I used to? Why does this job, this city, this version of me feel like it belongs to someone else? No, you're not crazy. You're awakening. What if I told you that the unease you're feeling is not a breakdown, but a breakthrough? That the disconnection, the restlessness, the urge to withdraw isn't regression, it's transformation. You're not falling behind. You're being called forward. Carl Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But here you are, facing it, feeling the stir, that quiet tension that keeps you up at night. The one that doesn't go away with distractions or temporary pleasure. That's not anxiety. That's the soul knocking. You see, transformation rarely announces itself with clarity. It whispers, it disorients. It strips away what no longer serves so you can finally hear what's been calling you from within. Right now, you may feel like you don't fit into your old life anymore. That's not because you're lost. It's because you've outgrown the version of yourself that was built to survive. The mask, the people pleaser, the overachiever, the caretaker, the one who said yes when they meant no. Those parts of you were never wrong. They were necessary. But they're not who you are becoming. You're not retreating. You're recalibrating. You're not losing your way. You're shedding what no longer aligns. You're not breaking down. You're breaking open. And that's terrifying. Because no one taught us how to let go of identities we've outgrown. We were taught to chase certainty, to cling to the known. But awakening asks something more radical. It asks us to trust what we can't yet see. Have you noticed the signs? You crave more silence. You feel drained around certain people. You're less tolerant of shallow conversations. You feel called to protect your energy, your peace, your space. These aren't random shifts. They're signals. Signals that something ancient inside you is re-emerging, something more aligned, more honest, more whole. And here's the truth. You don't need to have it all figured out to be on the right path. Awakening doesn't begin with a plan. It begins with a fracture, a moment of, I can't do this anymore. And from that moment forward, nothing feels the same. But that's not a problem. That's the portal. You're not falling apart. You're falling into place. So if you're watching this, if you felt any of what I just described, stay here. This isn't just another video. This is a mirror, a signal, a permission slip. You don't need to go back to who you were. You're not meant to. You're here because the old you can't come with you. This is where it begins. The unraveling, the remembering, the rising. Not everyone will understand your silence, your distance, your shifts. And that's okay. They're not supposed to. You're not here to be understood by who you've outgrown. You're here to become who you were always meant to be. Now take a breath. Feel that? That's not fear. That's freedom. And it starts now. There comes a moment quiet at first when you stop saying yes so easily. Not because you become bitter, not because you don't care, but because something deep inside you whispers, not this time. It might start small. You ignore a message instead of replying out of obligation. You decline an invitation, not because you're busy, but because you're tired of pretending. You say no to a favor that drains you, and suddenly, someone calls you selfish, ungrateful, distant, and it hurts. It always hurts at first, because for so long, you've built your identity on being the dependable one, the one who shows up, the one who keeps the peace. You've been the bridge for others, the glue that holds things together, the comforter of emotions that were never yours to carry. But Carl Jung warned us what we build as a persona, a mask to navigate the world, eventually becomes a cage. A beautiful decorated cage where you smile through resentment, where your worth is measured by how much of yourself you can give away, until something inside you breaks. Or maybe wakes, and you realize living for approval is not living. Pleasing everyone is not peace. And being agreeable is not the same as being whole. That's the first real sign of awakening. You start to question the invisible contracts you've been bound to. Who told me I had to be everything to everyone? Who taught me that love must be earned through self-abandonment? When did I begin believing that saying no made me a bad person? The truth is, most people aren't upset that you said no. They're upset that you're no longer easy to manipulate. You begin to see the pattern. How often your yes was a survival tactic, a way to avoid rejection, a way to feel needed, a way to be liked. But now, you're starting to notice the cost, the exhaustion, the emotional hangover, the way your needs have become secondary, even invisible. And then one day, you stop apologizing for choosing yourself. That's when the guilt turns into clarity. The fear turns into freedom. No longer making everyone comfortable becomes your quiet revolution. You understand now. Saying yes when you mean no isn't kindness, it's a form of self-betrayal. And what they call selfish, you now recognize as sacred. Protecting your peace is not a crime. Honoring your time is not rude. Saying, "This is not for me," is not abandonment, it's alignment. You're not withdrawing from people. You're returning to yourself. Of course, some won't like it. They were only comfortable with you when you were convenient, when your boundaries were blurred, when you didn't speak up, and your silence suited their comfort. But now you've remembered that your voice matters, that your no is just as holy as your yes, and that the people who truly love you don't need you to be small, agreeable, or always available to feel safe around you. They just need you to be real. This is the beginning of power. Not the loud kind, the quiet, grounded kind that doesn't flinch when called too much, or too distant, or not the same anymore, because you're not the same. And thank God for that. You're not here to be a mirror for others. You're here to be a mirror for yourself. So the next time someone calls you difficult for drawing a boundary, or selfish for putting yourself first, smile gently, not because you owe them an explanation, but because you finally see the truth. You were never selfish. You were just sacred. And now, you're learning to act like it. There is a kind of loneliness that doesn't feel like lack. It doesn't sting like rejection. It doesn't echo like absence. Instead, it feels full, quietly full. Like being in a vast, sacred room where everything unnecessary has been cleared out and only you remain. You sit in that silence. Not with fear, but with reverence. And for the first time, you don't rush to fill it. Carl Jung once said, "Solitude is not a punishment, it is a threshold. And when you step across that threshold, everything changes. Not outside, but inside. Because what you thought was emptiness, that space you feared would swallow you whole, it turns out to be the very place where your soul has been waiting. Golden, but full. Golden, but enough. Golden, but exactly where you need to be. This isn't the kind of loneliness that demands company. It's the kind that reveals truth, the kind that slowly dissolves the noise of the world and lays bare the deeper rhythms of your being. You begin to feel your own presence as an idea, not as a role but as something real, living, breathing, sacred. You wake up in the morning and the stillness doesn't scare you anymore. You don't scroll to avoid silence. You don't text someone just to feel connected. You let the morning hold you. Let the light come through the window like a conversation meant only for you. And you begin to understand something. You were never truly alone. You were just distracted, pulled in every direction, surrounded by noise that made you forget your own voice. And now that the noise is gone, your voice returns. Soft, slow, steady. And so does your knowing. You know who drains you. You know what you've outgrown. You know what peace feels like no, and how rare it is. You know you'd rather sit in this sacred aloneness than go back to the places where you had to beg to be seen. It doesn't mean you don't want connection. You do, but not at the cost of yourself. Not if it asks you to shrink. Not if it steals this stillness you've worked so hard to reclaim. This solitude, it's not loneliness. It's alignment. It's where you stopped running. It's where you let yourself fall. And when you hit the ground, you realized it wasn't cold or hard. It was soft, solid, yours. There will be moments of ache, moments you wish you had someone's hand to hold. But even in those moments, there's no desperation, no emptiness, just longing, pure, honest, unafraid. Because now you know you are not a half looking for completion. You are whole, standing open. And if someone comes, it will be a meeting of fullness, not a patching of holes. You begin to notice the beauty in small things again, the sound of your own breath, the weight of your body in bed, the quiet joy of making tea and sitting with your thoughts. You notice how much life is happening in the stillness you once feared. You used to believe that being alone meant something was missing. But now you see this space was always here. You just didn't know how to enter it before. Now you do. And once you've tasted this kind of solitude, the kind that feels like coming home to yourself, you stop settling for noise, for half love, for anything that pulls you away from your own presence. You choose differently, not out of fear, but out of deep self-respect. Because now you know the truth. Loneliness isn't always lack. Sometimes it's sacred. Sometimes it's the doorway. Sometimes it's the only path to your real self. Godun, but not lost. Godun, but becoming. Godun, but alive in a way you've never been before. And that's not something to escape. That's something to honor. There's a quiet moment when you realize something has shifted. You're sitting across from someone who once meant everything to you, and yet the conversation feels hollow. You smile, you nod. But deep down, there's a stillness. Not peace, not anger, just a knowing. You have outgrown this connection, and no one did anything wrong. It's not that they betrayed you. It's not that you've stopped caring. It's just that your inner world has changed, and the relationship no longer meets you where you now stand. In the past, maybe you would have ignored this feeling. Maybe you would have tried harder, said more, laughed louder, just to keep things alive. But now, you don't feel the need to force what's no longer flowing. Carl Jung taught us that much of what we call love is often projection. We fall not just for who someone is, but for what they represent. An image, a hope, a mirror of what we believe we lack. And in many ways, that's what those old relationships were. They filled something. They gave you a role to play, a space to be needed, wanted, seen. But slowly, as you've grown, you've realized many of those connections were built not on mutual awareness, but on mutual wounds. You needed someone to validate your worth. They needed someone to rescue or adore them. It worked for a while, but healing changes everything. You no longer crave relationships that are based on filling a void. Now you seek something deeper, a kind of resonance, a meeting of two aware selves, each whole on their own, yet drawn together by shared growth, not dependency. And that's why some of your old relationships feel strange now. Not bad, just misaligned. You hear the stories you've heard 100 times, and you wonder why they still matter so much to the other person. You listen, but it feels like you're floating above the moment, observing it from afar. Not disconnected, just detached. You realize the dynamic hasn't changed, even though you have. And that realization is sobering. You might ask yourself, am I being cold? But it's not coldness. It's clarity. You're beginning to want different things from your connections. Depth, intimacy that isn't built on repetition, conversations that leave you expanded, not depleted, spaces where silence isn't awkward, but sacred. That kind of connection is rare, but it's worth waiting for. Because once you've tasted the depth of being in alignment with yourself, it's almost impossible to go back to surface-level relating. You no longer want to be needed just for what you can give. You want to be seen for who you are now, not who you were. And that shift can feel isolating, because many people only know how to relate to the old version of you, the one who compromised, the one who dimmed her light, the one who stayed quiet to keep the peace. But she's no longer here. And so, you gently pull away. Not out of resentment, but out of reverence for your own growth. You stop initiating. You reply slower, you give more time to yourself. And little by little, some relationships begin to fade. At first, it hurts. There's grief in letting go of what once felt like home. But eventually, the grief gives way to gratitude. You thank them, in your heart, for who they were to you, for the chapter they helped you write, for the love that existed, however imperfect. Then you turn the page, because now you are no longer looking for someone to fill a space. You are looking for someone who meets you in the space you've created within yourself, a space of truth, stillness, expansion. So if you're here, noticing that certain connections no longer feel like home, know this: you're not abandoning anyone, you're returning to yourself. And from that place, only those who truly see you can stay. There comes a strange moment on the path of awakening. You wake up and realize you no longer recognize yourself, not fully, not in the way you used to. The things that once defined you feel distant. The opinions you clung to, the dreams you swore you'd chase, the personality you performed for the world. It's all still there, in fragments, but it no longer feels like home. And here's the strange part. You're not panicking. You're not desperate to reclaim who you were. You're not rushing to fill the void. You're simply observing. Carl Jung spoke of this as the death of the ego, dissolution of the constructed self. The version of you built through years of adaptation, expectation, and survival. The self you showed the world. The one that made sense in the eyes of others. That self is now shedding, like old skin peeling away, not in violence, but in quiet release. You feel it falling off in moments when you say, "I don't know what I want anymore." Or when someone asks, "So, what do you do?" And you hesitate, not because you don't have an answer, but because the answer feels too small. You used to have labels for everything. Who you were, what you stood for, what you liked, who you loved. You wore them like armor, introduced yourself with them, relied on them to feel real. But now you feel undefined, not in a broken way, but in a way that's beginning again. As if your soul is whispering, "Let it fall, let it all fall." You find yourself less interested in being understood and more drawn to being authentic. You no longer need to be seen as put together or successful or kind in ways that drain you. You are unlearning the need to be consistent with who you once were. And it's disorienting, because we were taught to chase clarity, to always know who we are, to speak with certainty, to brand ourselves publicly, socially, even spiritually. But Jung reminds us true transformation begins with unknowing, with allowing the ego to collapse, with daring to ask, "Who am I without all of this?" And to sit in the silence after the question. That silence is the threshold. You feel it when you look at your closet and wonder why your clothes no longer feel like you. When the music you used to love no longer moves you. When the friends who knew your old self feel miles away, and not because they changed, but because you did. You haven't become someone else. You've just stopped clinging to the roles you once played. The helper, the achiever, the rebel, the pleaser, the one who always knew what to say, the one who carried everyone's weight, the one who had it all figured out. Now, you're simply you. And that's not a fixed thing. It's shifting, breathing, becoming. Every day, a little closer to something truer. Not a new identity to wear, but a deeper presence to embody. This phase is not glamorous. It's raw, tender, often invisible to others. From the outside, nothing may seem different. But inside, it feels like the entire structure of who you thought you were is gently coming undone, not in chaos. In truth, you may not have new answers yet, but you've stopped pretending the old ones still fit. And that is freedom. So if you feel lost, uncertain, no longer resonating with the image you once presented to the world, Know this: you are not failing. You are evolving. This is not an identity crisis. It is an identity clearing. And what remains after the fall? Not a polished version of you. A real one. One that doesn't need to explain itself. One that isn't tied to the past. One that is finally willing to just be. You don't know who you are anymore. And strangely, that feels like the most honest thing you've ever said. Because it is. And from here everything begins. People start to notice it before you do. You speak less. You react slower. You no longer rush to fill the silence in a conversation. The old urgency to explain, to defend, to perform, it's just not there anymore. And someone says, "You've changed." At first, you might wonder if something's wrong. Why aren't you as talkative? Why do crowded rooms feel louder than they used to? Why does it feel easier now to simply observe rather than jump in? But then you realize, this isn't withdrawal. This is refinement. You've become quiet. Yes. But not because you're unsure. Not because you're fragile. Because you are finally rooted. Listening. Whole. Carl Jung described individuation as a return to the inner self. A turning inward, not to escape the world, but to meet yourself beneath all the noise. And that's what this silence is. Not absence. Presence. You're not losing your voice. You're finally hearing it. There's a difference between being silent because you're afraid and being silent because you're certain. One shrinks, the other anchors. You used to respond to everything. Every comment. Every challenge. Every moment of discomfort. Now, you let most of it pass through you. Not out of indifference, but because you know your energy is sacred. You don't explain yourself to be understood. You don't react just to be seen. You choose. And that choice comes from strength. You've stopped needing to be loud to prove you're alive. Your life now speaks in subtler ways, in how you walk into a room, in how you hold eye contact, in how you say no without flinching, in how you smile when others try to provoke you, and it simply doesn't land. Because you're not there to be provoked. You're not there to win or be right. You're there to be true. And truth, real truth, doesn't shout. It just is. You may find that people begin to project onto your quietness. They say you're distant, too intense, maybe even arrogant. But that's only because they've never learned how to be still with themselves, and your stillness reminds them of what they're avoiding. Let them think what they will. You no longer need to be understood by the noise you've outgrown. You understand yourself now, and that's enough. This is the part of the journey that surprises most people. They expect awakening to come with fire, with declarations, with constant epiphanies. But the deeper truth is this. Real power often arrives without a sound. It comes in the form of restraint, of patience, of discernment. You walk away from what no longer serves you, and you don't announce it. You don't post about it. You don't need a witness. You are the witness. You used to be afraid of losing things, connections, titles, approval. Now your fear is wasting time on what drains you. You protect your peace like it's oxygen, because it is. Imlang. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you are finally saying something to yourself. Imlang. Because this moment deserves your presence more than your performance. Imlang. Because your soul is speaking now. And it does not speak in volume. It speaks in vibration. You're not quiet because you've become small. You're quiet because you've grown. There's a fierce dignity in that. A soft fire. And once you've felt it, once you've learned to sit in that space and not run from it, not fill it, not apologize for it, everything changes. You become unshakable. Not loud. Not harsh. Just clear. And clarity is a force the world doesn't always recognize, but it always respects. So if you find yourself speaking less, reacting less, needing less, and hearing Maredu, not panic. Do not doubt. You're not disappearing. You're arriving. In full. In stillness. In strength. This is what power feels like before it makes a sound. If even one of these signs spoke to you, pause for a moment. Not to panic. Not to overanalyze. But to simply acknowledge what's already happening. You're not lost. You're awakening. And yes, it can feel messy. Quiet. Lonely. liberating, all at once. That's the nature of transformation. It's not a straight line. It unfolds in layers, in silence, in signs, in subtle choices that slowly shape a new version of you. So, if you find yourself letting go of who you were, if you feel the shift in your relationships, if your silence has become more sacred than your words, you are not alone in this. You are being invited into something deeper, and I want to know, do you feel it? If so, write in the comments, "I'm awakening." Just those 2 words. You might be surprised by how many others are right here with you, quietly shifting, quietly remembering who they are. Because there's something powerful about speaking that truth even in a single sentence. It creates space. It builds connection. It reminds you that this path, while deeply personal, is not one you're walking alone. And if you've made it this far, stay with me. In the next video, we're going deeper. We'll explore something Jung called the shadow, the part of you that hides in plain sight, the part that influences your decisions, your relationships, your fears often without you even realizing it. Understanding the shadow changes everything. Because when you finally see what's been living just beneath the surface, you don't just awaken, you begin to reclaim your power. So subscribe. Turn on notifications. Stay close. You've already taken the first step. Now, let's keep going. Together.